There was only one key in my house that nobody was allowed to touch. Not my front door, not the gun cabinet, not the old pickup. A tiny brass key hanging behind a framed photograph of my late wife. For 17 years, it had never left that hook. My daughter used to ask what it opened. I'd always smile and answer the same way. Your mother's happiest day. She never understood what I meant. Maybe I hoped she never would. My name is Thomas Mercer. I'm 76 years old. Most widowers spend years learning how to live without the woman they loved. I spent those same years learning how to protect what she left behind. Not jewelry, not money, not property, just memories. Some people think memories disappear when the people who created them are gone. They're wrong. Sometimes they live inside ordinary things: a handwritten recipe, a faded photograph, an old birthday card, or a wedding veil folded inside a cedar chest that hadn't been opened since the day I buried my wife. People often asked why I never remarried. The answer was simple. I'd already spent 48 wonderful years with the only woman I ever wanted. Margaret wasn't perfect, neither was I. But every morning for nearly 5 decades, she reached across the bed to make sure I was still there. After cancer took her, I still woke up expecting to feel her hand. Old habits don't disappear just because someone's heart stops beating. Our daughter, Claire, was 28 when her mother passed away. Grief changed both of us, just not in the same way. I held tighter to the past. She tried to erase it. At first, I thought that was simply how she coped. She donated clothes, packed away family photographs, sold furniture her mother loved. Whenever I protested, Claire always said the same thing. "Dade, you can't keep living in a museum." Maybe she was right, but I wasn't preserving a museum. I was preserving my wife. Everything became worse after Claire met Ethan. He had expensive taste, expensive watches, expensive suits, expensive opinions. The first time he visited my home, he walked through every room like a real estate investor inspecting a property. He complimented nothing. He evaluated everything. This kitchen could be modernized. Those hardwood floors should be replaced. That antique cabinet is worth a fortune. He never once asked who built it. Margaret's father had, with his own hands. To Ethan, history had a price tag, nothing more. One Sunday afternoon, I found Ethan standing in my bedroom. He wasn't snooping, at least not anymore. He already had the cedar chest open. The brass lock hung from the side. Inside, old letters, wedding photographs, a dried bouquet, Margaret's lace gloves, and beneath carefully folded tissue paper, the wedding veil. He picked it up with one hand. "People actually keep this stuff." I gently took it from him. "Please don't touch it." He laughed. "It's just old fabric." "No, it isn't." He rolled his eyes. "You know what I mean." I looked directly at him. "No, I don't." Claire appeared in the doorway. "Dad, he's only curious." I carefully folded the veil again. There are some things curiosity has no right to handle. Neither of them apologized. That evening, for the first time in 17 years, I moved the brass key. Not because I wanted to hide the chest, because something inside me whispered that one day, someone would stop asking permission. A month later, Claire called. "Dade, I've got wonderful news." She and Ethan were engaged. I congratulated her, and I meant it. No father wants his daughter to begin marriage carrying resentment from her own family. So when she asked if I'd help organize a small engagement celebration at my house, I immediately agreed. She sounded happier than she'd been in years. For the first time, I thought perhaps Ethan had simply made a poor first impression. Maybe we'd finally become a family. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of the celebration, I unlocked the cedar chest. Only because I'd made Claire a promise when she was little. If she ever got married, she could decide whether she wanted to wear her mother's wedding veil. Not because tradition demanded it. Because Margaret once whispered to me, "If Claire ever falls in love, I'd like a little piece of me to walk beside her." I smiled through tears as I carefully lifted the delicate lace. Even after all those years, it still carried the faint scent of cedar, almost like opening the door to another lifetime. I placed the veil inside a protective keepsake box and carried it downstairs. Guests had already started arriving. Laughter filled the house. Music played softly from the dining room. Claire looked beautiful. For a moment, I believed Margaret would have been smiling too. Then Ethan noticed the keepsake box. "What have you got there?" Claire turned. I slowly opened the lid. "It's your mother's wedding veil. I've kept it safe all these years. I thought, if you wanted to wear it someday." Before I could finish, Claire's smile disappeared. She looked at the veil, Then at Ethan, he smirked. Without saying a single word, he gave the slightest nod. Claire reached into the box, and my heart suddenly began to race. Claire lifted the veil from the keepsake box. She didn't admire it. She didn't hold it up to the light. She barely looked at it. Instead, she frowned. "I can't wear this," I smiled gently. "You don't have to. I only wanted you to have the choice your mother hoped you'd have." Claire glanced toward Ethan. He shrugged. "It doesn't match the image. The image. Our wedding has a modern theme." He pinched a corner of the delicate lace between two fingers. "This looks like something from a museum." I carefully reached for it. "Please, give it back." Instead, he handed it to Claire. "You deal with it." The room slowly became quieter. Guests sensed something was wrong. My sister Evelyn noticed the tension from across the living room. She started walking toward us. She didn't arrive in time. Claire looked directly into my eyes. "Dad, I've been wanting to say this for years." My stomach tightened. "You've turned this house into a shrine." She held up the veil. "You keep pretending Mom's still here." I quietly answered, "No, I remember that she was. That's different." She shook her head. "It's unhealthy." "It isn't." "It is. Ethan's right. This old stuff keeps everyone trapped." Several guests looked at each other uncomfortably. Nobody interrupted. I stepped one pace closer. "Claire, when your mother was dying, she placed this veil in my hands. You were standing beside us. You remember what she said?" Claire looked away. "I remember." "Then you remember why I've protected it." She folded her arms. "I was 28. I believed a lot of things back then." My voice became quieter. "Your mother believed them too." Ethan suddenly laughed. Not loudly, just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You know what this really is?" He pointed toward the veil. "Emotional clutter." My brother David stepped forward. "Watch your mouth." Ethan didn't even look at him. "I'm serious. It's old lace. It's yellowing. It's falling apart. It's worthless." I answered before anyone else could. "No. It's priceless." Claire sighed impatiently. "This is exactly why I never wanted to come home. Everything has to be about Mom." I stared at my daughter. "She's your mother." "She was." Claire corrected me. "She isn't anymore." The words landed harder than I expected. Not because they were technically untrue. Because they came from the little girl who used to fall asleep wearing Margaret's old sweaters after the funeral. I barely recognized the woman standing before me. My granddaughter Lily quietly walked into the room carrying a tray of lemonade. She was only 12. She looked from my face to her mother, to the wedding veil. She whispered, "Is that Grandma Margaret's?" I smiled sadly. "Yes, that's beautiful." Claire snapped, "Lily, go outside." The little girl slowly left, looking back over her shoulder, confused. The silence became unbearable. I gently extended my hand. "Claire, please, give me your mother's veil." For one brief second, I thought she would. Her fingers loosened. Then Ethan leaned closer and whispered something into her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the change in her face. She stopped hesitating. Her expression became cold, almost determined. She looked directly at me. "I need you to move on." Before I could answer, she grabbed both ends of the delicate lace. I took one desperate step forward. "Claire, don't." The first tear echoed through the room. A sharp ripping sound, then another and another. The lace separated in her hands. Tiny pearls scattered across the hardwood floor. Pieces of embroidered fabric drifted down like snow. 17 years of careful protection, destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I looked at the torn pieces lying at my feet. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't bend down to pick them up. Then Ethan wrapped an arm around Claire, smirked, looked straight at me, and said, "Out with the old garbage." "Dad," the words hadn't even finished leaving his mouth when someone behind him quietly spoke. "I wouldn't have said that if I were you." Every head in the room turned toward the front doorway. A woman in her 70s stood there holding a sealed envelope. She wasn't family, but the moment I saw her, I knew exactly who she was. Margaret's oldest friend. And she was carrying something my wife had left behind. The room remained frozen. No one spoke. No one bent down to pick up the torn lace scattered across my hardwood floor. Margaret's oldest friend quietly closed the front door behind her. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. She had been standing beside my wife on our wedding day 50 years earlier. If anyone alive knew what that veil meant, it was Eleanor. She slowly looked down at the torn pieces, then at Claire. "I was afraid I'd be too late." Claire folded her arms. "I'm sorry you had to see this." Eleanor calmly answered, "No, "I'm sorry, Margaret isn't here to see who you've become." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Ethan scoffed. "It's just fabric." Eleanor turned toward him. "No. It was hand-stitched by Margaret's grandmother. It survived 2 generations. Breast cancer didn't destroy it. Time didn't destroy it. You did." My sister Evelyn quietly knelt beside the scattered lace. She began collecting the tiny pearls one by one. Soon, another guest joined her, then another. Without saying a word, nearly everyone in the room was helping gather the damaged pieces. Only Claire and Ethan remained standing, watching. Neither offered to help. Eleanor walked toward me. "I'm sorry, Thomas." I nodded. "So am I." She gently handed me the sealed envelope she'd been carrying. Margaret's handwriting covered the front. "For Thomas, but only if someone ever forgets what love looks like." My fingers stopped moving. I recognized every curve of her handwriting instantly. I hadn't seen it in years. I didn't know this existed. Eleanor smiled sadly. She asked me to keep it, and promised I'd know exactly when to deliver it. Claire looked confused. "What letter?" Eleanor faced her. "One your mother specifically chose not to leave with you." The room became silent again. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside, there wasn't just one letter. There were 2. One addressed to me, the other addressed to Claire, still sealed. Margaret's name was written beneath it. "For my daughter, when she's ready to remember instead of replace." Claire stared at it. For just a second, her confidence disappeared. I unfolded my letter. The paper had yellowed with age. My eyes blurred before I reached the first sentence. "Thomas, if you're reading this, something precious has been broken. Maybe it's the veil. Maybe it's someone's heart. I only hope one can still be repaired." I smiled through tears. That sounded exactly like Margaret, always believing broken things deserved another chance. I continued reading silently. Then one sentence stopped me, completely. I looked up at Eleanor. She quietly nodded. Read it aloud, my voice trembled. Margaret wrote, "If Claire ever decides my wedding veil no longer matters, please don't argue with her. Give it to her willingly." Several guests exchanged confused looks. Claire looked relieved. "I told you." But I hadn't reached the next sentence. I swallowed hard, then continued, "Because the real family heirloom was never inside the cedar chest." The room became absolutely still. Even Ethan stopped smiling. Claire frowned. "What does that mean?" Eleanor answered softly, "It means your mother was smarter than all of us." She reached into her handbag, then removed a small velvet pouch. I had never seen it before. She handed it to me. "Margaret asked me to keep this separate. Forever. Unless today ever happened." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside rested an old brass key. Not the one that opened the cedar chest, a different one. Smaller, older. Attached to a faded ribbon Margaret had braided herself. There was also a folded note. Just 4 words. "Bedroom floor, 3rd plank." I looked toward the hallway. My heart started pounding. I knew exactly which room she meant. Our bedroom. The house we'd shared for nearly 50 years. The room where Margaret had spent her final days. The room where, years earlier, she'd insisted on replacing one loose floorboard herself. At the time, she claimed it was because it squeaked. Now, I wasn't so sure. Claire whispered, "What is under that floor?" I slowly closed my hand around the tiny brass key, then looked at my daughter. I honestly have no idea. Nobody moved. Nobody asked another question. The tiny brass key resting in my palm suddenly felt heavier than the cedar chest ever had. Margaret had hidden something from everyone, even me. For 17 years, Eleanor quietly smiled. I promised her I would never tell you where it was. Unless someone destroyed the veil. I looked at her. So she knew. Eleanor nodded. Margaret knew grief changes people, but she also knew greed changes them faster. She glanced toward Ethan, and she prepared for both. Without another word, I walked toward the hallway. Every guest followed, even Claire. The house became strangely quiet. No music, no conversation, only the sound of footsteps crossing old hardwood floors. We entered the bedroom. Nothing had changed in years. Margaret's rocking chair still faced the window. Her favorite novel still rested on the nightstand. The floral curtains she'd sewn herself still hung beside the bed. Claire looked around. "I haven't been in here since the funeral." "I know." I walked to the left side of the room. 3rd plank from the window, exactly where Margaret had insisted on repairing the floor years ago. I knelt, slipped the tiny brass key into a nearly invisible lock hidden between the wooden boards. It fit perfectly. I turned it once. A soft click echoed through the room. The floorboard slowly lifted. Underneath, sat a long wooden case wrapped inside oilcloth, perfectly preserved. No one spoke. I carefully lifted it onto the bed. My hands trembled, not from fear, from hope. Inside the case lay another wedding veil, identical. Every stitch, every pearl, every piece of lace. Claire gasped. There were two. Eleanor smiled through tears. Margaret restored the original years before she became sick. She loved it too much to risk losing it, so she made an exact duplicate. The one inside the cedar chest was never the original. The room fell silent. I looked toward the torn pieces still clutched in my sister Evelyn's hands. Margaret had protected the real veil without telling a single person. Even in death, she'd been one step ahead. Beneath the veil rested another envelope, this one addressed to everyone. I unfolded it. My family F. If you're reading this together, then something has gone terribly wrong. Several guests quietly lowered their heads. Margaret continued, I don't care which veil survives. I care whether this family does. Then came the sentence that broke me. Thomas, never measure my memory by objects. Measure it by the kindness people show each other when I'm no longer there. I closed my eyes. For a moment, it felt as though she was standing beside me again. Claire began crying, not quietly, not politely, the kind of crying that comes when regret arrives too late. She slowly walked toward the bed. I didn't know. No, I answered softly. You didn't want to know. She looked down. I was angry. I thought you loved memories more than me. I shook my head. The memories existed because I loved your mother. I kept them because I loved both of you. She covered her face. I'm sorry. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard all day. Ethan stepped forward. This changes nothing. Everyone turned toward him. He shrugged. So there was another veil. It's still old fabric. Before I could answer, Claire did. She turned toward him with tears still running down her face. It isn't. It's everything I forgot. She slowly removed her engagement ring. Ethan stared. What are you doing? I'm listening. To my mother. For the first time in years, she placed the ring in his hand. We're finished. His confident smile disappeared. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. You convinced me my family was holding me back. She looked around the room. The only thing holding me back was believing you. He reached for her arm. She stepped away. Leave. Nobody stopped him. Nobody defended him. For the first time since I'd met him, he had nothing left to say. He walked out of my house alone. The front door closed behind him. No one followed. Several months later, Claire asked if we could restore the damaged veil anyway. Not because she planned to wear it, because she wanted future generations to know what almost disappeared forever. Together, we worked with a textile conservator. Every surviving piece, every tiny pearl, every torn thread, was carefully preserved inside a museum-quality display frame. Beside it hung Margaret's final letter, and beneath both, a small brass plaque. Love is never destroyed by time, only by the people who forget its value. Last spring, Claire brought my great-granddaughter to see it. The little girl pointed toward the framed veil. Who made that? Claire smiled. Your great-grandmother. Then she pointed at me. And your great-grandfather taught me why we never throw away the people we love. I looked at Margaret's photograph hanging above the display. After all those years, I finally understood. She hadn't hidden the real treasure beneath the floor. She had hidden one final lesson. And she trusted that, when the time came, love would uncover it.